I'm now going to introduce a very brave woman. Her name is Rauni Leena. She made a very successful book some years ago called There Is No Death. And now she's going to talk about something which is a secret and dark world for many of us, which is the issues of mind control and non-lethal weapons, which is being used in secret all over the world. So please, Rauni, tell the world things that you want them to know.
Well, there are a lot of things I want the world to know. The very first one is that there is no death, because it all comes to the question, what is a human being? The human being is mostly physically water. 87% of our brain is water, 70% of our body is water. What holds it together is energy, of course, and energy, according to Einstein, only changes form, so it cannot die. That's number one. And because we are energy beings, so it's very easy to understand that we can be influenced by other energies from outside. I would like to start with the words of the FBI former director, Edgar Hoover. He said, "The individual is handicapped by coming to face with conspiracy so monstrous he cannot believe it exists." There was a very good presentation in this conference in Germany. It was the 5th one on non-lethal weapons, and it was an American colonel who said, "Who are they?" When all the time one says, well, they do this, and they harass me, and they sabotage, and they terrorize, so who are they? And he had a presentation of it, and there was a picture in the middle, New World Order. On the other side there was a sign with the Star of David, Illuminati. Then there was CIA and FBI, and then also the British intelligence. So they are them who are behind it. Have been always, and probably always will.
So these are government agencies like the CIA, which officially has as their purpose to defend the American citizens and maybe the citizens of the world. So it might seem that they are somehow abusing their power, turning it against the interests of their own people.
You know, that's quite correct. I was always thinking when I was younger that police and the military are for the people. Now I know that part of them, not all, part of them are still for the people, helping people, defending their country. But a big part of them are working against the people. And they are doing it with field experimentations because they have new weapons for mass destructions, which have been going on for over 30 years officially, because in 1975, already at the UN, the Russian delegation, it was Andrei Gromyko, who was at that time the foreign minister, asked that these new weapons of mass destruction, which are horrible, you cannot detect them, you cannot see them, radio waves, microwaves, lasers, etc., they destroy our brain, our health, our environment, etc. So he was asking that the UN would decide that these would be abandoned totally. He got good response from many, but the US was opposing, claiming that since 1948 there have been no new weapons of mass destruction, so the question is out of the question. I mean, this is crazy, because the US is the leader in the world of these non-lethal new weapons. And the danger is that they can take over anybody today. Anybody. They used to experiment with people in the prisoners. They used to experiment with mental patients. They still do that.
So that is without their consent?
Absolutely without their consent. It's criminal. It's totally criminal. And now they take anybody, just anybody, but especially single women, because they don't have protection of the family. You know, if a single woman vanishes, so it takes some time before somebody finds out. If a married woman vanishes, the same day the family cries. So it's single women, it's people who know their bad deeds, it's people, scientists especially, who are involved and find out too much. They all of a sudden have a heart attack or a brain tumor or a stroke or whatever, or they're driven over by a car, or they even go down in a flight accident with hundreds of other people.
So they have their methods to make people disappear or die, those who maybe know too much or are want to protest because they don't like what they are experiencing.
Yeah, they have such power that, like FBI's former director Hoover said, it's so horrible you cannot believe it. They have weapons today, electromagnetic weapons. They can throw them at your brain, and like you have fingertips which are unique, your brain waves are unique. Every one of the 6.5 billion people has a unique brain wave. They can take that into supercomputers, and at the moment the supercomputers are 180 trillion flops in a second. 180 trillion in a second. Our brain is only 5,000 bits a second, so we have no match to the supercomputers. But since this has been published, and usually the information that is published is 50 years old, so what the real figure is, I have no idea. Because I found out from this non-lethal weapons conference from the American representative, he said that already in 1801 the first mind control device was created. Can you imagine? 1801. And I know that in Ohio a doctor was already doing 1874 unethical research, putting electrodes into the brain of a patient, a female patient who died. So, you know, this is a century, 2 centuries old technology, and now it's coming out. This is new. It's not new. Anything that comes out from the military is at least 50 years old. And academic, especially in Europe and Scandinavia, academic research is at least 1 or 2 generations behind. They have no idea. For instance, there's a British Professor Warwick, I think his name was. He's lectured a couple of times in Finland. I only read what he has been stating. And it was just crazy. He was saying that he was the first man who has placed an implant into his hand, and so he goes out and opens the doors and garage and whatever. And now he says he is the first man in the world who puts an electrode, which is a microchip, into his brain, and now he can talk to his wife telepathically. Now, already in 1952, Project Moonstruck, CIA's own project, placed electrodes into the brain and teeth of people to follow them. 1952. Now he comes out after year 2000. So, like I said, it's at least 50 years old, you know, behind the academic research about these things. They don't know about the military, or then they are bought and they are giving disinformation.
So part of the purposes of using this technology is to control people. Is it so? This sounds a bit like the Matrix movie.
It is, exactly. Hollywood is used, absolutely used, to put out things which are true, but then they can say, oh, but it was just a little film. Think of Independence Day. It looked like September 11th in a way. You know, people running and skyscrapers collapsing and things like that. Hollywood is totally under control and used.
They just made a movie about chemtrails.
Oh, good.
To make I
hope they show it what it really is, because you know, like I just mentioned, that I had sent an email to a journalist I met in Germany in the conference, and I said, you were talking about chemtrails again. And in 10 minutes, chemtrails came over my house here in Soon, and they made an expendable. They've done that before. And of course chemtrails are very, very bad for the health of people, because they have, in power form, they have titanium, aluminium, magnesium, etc., barium, maybe the worst. And it comes down and you breathe it. And that's why we have asthma and bronchitis and diseases have gone up like this. And at the same time, you're implanted with a microchip, because that is metal, even if it is in a power form.
So the final destination of these programs they've been searching and researching for about 100 years is to finally can be able to control larger areas of populations.
That's right.
Try to control the common sense of people.
It's not common sense. They want the people under total control, so that they are controlled against their own wish and own will. For instance, we have read about the school shootings. We have had 2 cases in Finland recently. Now, they are exactly a typical explanation for mind control and with delta programming, because delta programming means that the person is programmed first to kill just, anybody, and then to shoot himself. Because when he shoots himself, then nobody can come after and question what was the thing. And usually they say, oh, it was a psychotic patient, oh, he had problems, he was not good at school, he had no friends, he was on drugs, whatever. That's a perfect camouflage. And that's always for political reasons. And this goes on all over. So always ask who benefits, then you know about who is behind the whole scene.
Can you say something about the interface between the legal governments, like prime ministers, ministers of defense, and these forces called they?
Well, I think actually that all governments in the Western world anyway are controlled totally. They are just, they are errand boys. They have very little to say actually, because it's the New World Order, and those guys, like President Wilson said, those control. And it's a very small group, very, very small group. If I would say one who is among those, it would be Henry Kissinger. And he was not the president, he was advisor to the president. He was German, Heinz moved, and then what he did, other things, you better read from other books. They're pretty bad. But anyway, he got the Nobel Prize for Peace. I mean, can you imagine? I can't understand. But that is the way when you do something very, very bad, so you get a prize. And like I said, governments have nothing to say, but the people don't know it. So we are steered by data, and that is very, very scary. We're not steered by people anymore. It's the super data. It's not a guy who sits there and says, look, let's put something on her. It's the data. And that is really making us into biological robots. If we are implanted with a microchip, which happens with a handshake, a microchip today is 2 micromillimeters when your hair is 50. So if I had one and said hello to you, you get it and you can't get it out. But if I take an MRI X-ray, it gives a signal. And there are people that I have seen that have been implanted into the eyes or ears or brain or wherever. And when you have a device, put it here, it gives a signal. The person sort of squeaks. Squeeze. So you can prove it is there. And that is terrifying, because the next generation is going to be biological robots. Totally, they have nothing to say. Nothing, not to their feelings, because they can be changed. Hate to love and vice versa. Your sexuality can be changed. Your ideas, your voting. Americans did this experiment in Haiti. They had this so-called solo aircraft circling Haiti, circling when they had elections, and all of a sudden the public opinion changed and Americans got the president they wanted. I mean, that's pretty scary. And when they want you to, lose relationships, lose your husband, your wife, your family, it's just a frequency. They have taken all emotions into different frequencies. They also have a suicide frequency. So they can just throw that to you, and all of a sudden, click. And nobody can say that somebody murdered you.
How can you know that you're being influenced by these forces?
That's very difficult to know, because you think that it's your own thought. Stop. When something all of a sudden comes to you that I'll do this, so stop. Hey, why did I get this idea? Is it mine or was it induced? It's very, very difficult to know whether it's your own. But of course, if you feel like doing a suicide or murdering somebody, then you better think twice. Hey, I'm not that kind of a person. I was very surprised when I started going into this field and finding out that they are all over. All over. First I thought it was just the secret services or the police or the military. But no, it's in the hospitals, it's in insurance companies, it's in the what you call when you pay taxing companies or taxing institutions. It's in the field of people who take your garbage. It's in the field of people who are the conductors in the trains. It is everywhere. And I was most shocked to see and find out that it was also doctors and dentists. They implant a lot. People who don't know that they're being implanted. They can just give an injection or a handshake or whatever, and there you are. they're lawyers, they're professors. Every single sector of the society is involved. And of course, many of them don't know what they're doing. You know, they're being told, for instance, that oh, this X person is very bad. You know, it's bad for national security, or it's a pervert person, or whatever. You have to, you know, survey, and you have to observe, and you have to report to us whatever that person says or meets, or everything. And of course, this person believes it. They use handicapped people, especially those who sit in wheelchairs, those who are relators, old women. You would never think they're spies. Never ever, until somebody is revealed. So it's a smart system. I have to take my hat off. I mean, there are smart people who have created this, but it is a terrible, horrible system for the mankind. And if we can't stop that, if they use, like they do now, chemical warfare against their own people, electronic warfare, etc., we are going to be, as human beings, biological robots for computers. Now, isn't that awful? I think it's just atrocious, and nobody stops. And who is to blame? Mostly it is the politicians who allow it. But of course there is this big new world order who tells the politicians, who tells the press, this you cannot write about. So Big Brother comes and says you can't write about this. Freedom of press is zero. I mean, it's you can laugh at it. You can see it yourself. My own parents were subjected to these methods. My best friend just died, and with the same method. She knew too much, and my parents were eliminated because I know too much. And my mother said to me, Rauni, please stop. You know, she was being beamed and harassed and awful things done. And I said, Mom, if I stop, they won't. So the only thing I think is to continue to tell people what I know, and what they're going to do to me, it doesn't matter, because there's no death. You know, I know, I just got out of my body, so it's fine. But there is no human race as we know it if this goes on now for the next generation. But this is a reality. So how do you fight against it? Only by raising the awareness of the people, because nobody wants their child to be a biological robot to his computer. Nobody, right? Everybody wants something good in their life, and why don't they make us all happy? They could just put the frequency of love. There is a frequency for every single emotion. Let's put it, a frequency of love. So all my neighbors who attack me and do whatever, they would become nice, and I would become nice to them. Why don't they do that? No, they put the frequency of hate, and that's it, because it serves their interest. They plan to eliminate the middle class. There's only elite and slaves. The middle class who can think and read and write is no good. So the elite wants just the elite and slaves. You know, and they don't accept that anybody says that there is no death, because that changes their position. If there's no death, which I absolutely know, because I've been out of my body many times, that changes. You have a responsibility, not only for this life, but for the next and the next and a million years ahead. And what you have done, you can't escape. These guys escape now, but when they're dead, getting out of their body, then what did you do? And there's nobody telling you what did you do. It's you realizing it. Those who think that they are governing, they are also slaves, but they don't realize it. And it's very sad. Then when they wake up, it's usually too late.